Good morning, Facebook. All right, so yesterday, day 13 in the bread challenge. And today we start that next step of the habit loop. I don't know which direction to draw the circle when I'm looking at the camera this way, but remember it started with cue, moved to craving, and now we're on to response. The next one being reward, right? So if as it fits into the laws of behavior, it's make it obvious, goes with cue, make that cue obvious, the craving, make it attractive, which is one we just finished up. And then for response, it's make it easy. How can we make this behavior the easiest for us to move on and complete it? And it reminded me of a story actually that I read in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book by Gary Keller. Basically, in a section of the book, he talks about a professor who actually separates his class into two groups. One half of the class is told that they need to make pots and make as many pots as possible. The more pots they make, the better their grade will be at the end of the class. And the second group has to make the perfect pot. So they get to sit there and analyze and create and make the best pot that anybody can make, and their grade was going to be based on quality. So class separates, they go about their business, come back at the end for the grade, and which one do you think made the better pot? Wait a minute, Jeff, you just said half of them were being graded on making the most and half were being graded on making the best. Of course, the person making the best made the best pot. Well, no, actually, that's not what happened. And this story has repeated itself in different universities across the years with different items. And what actually ended up happening is that the group that made the most pots for their grade actually also ended up making the better pots. That frequency created a better product and a better result. That's pretty interesting, right? It's easy to get wrapped up into making the perfect plan. However, sometimes we get so focused in on developing the perfect plan that we don't ever really get into action, right? Like we sit there analyzing, like, okay, what's the best curve? How can we make it non-stick? Is this the right place for the handles? How's the production line gonna go? That's the pot story, right? As we're looking at everything else that we do in life, it could be, just getting out there and making a phone call to a client, right? Like over analyzing the script that you're going to use and just really getting bogged down in the words that you're going to have with a coworker, right? Like sometimes you just need to get out there and have the conversation. And so why is that? It's because actions are what actually deliver the results, right? Just thinking about something doesn't mean much. Having motion doesn't even mean much, right? Like we could walk over to have that conversation with a coworker or a client and never actually open our mouths. That motion doesn't actually create, eventually if we just keep walking, maybe eventually we build up the nerve to have that conversation, but it's the action, that one thing, that domino, that lead domino that creates the result, right? So how long does it actually take? Hopefully by now you said 66 days, but actually, again, remember the average is 18 to 254. 66 is the one that we're tracking in order to hit that. Like we might hit the end of this 66-day challenge and you might realize that that's not enough time for your behavior to have become a habit. Frequency is the key. I could jump up today and just decide that every time I go into a room, I'm going to turn on the light, right? So I could walk into the room, turn on the light, turn off the light. Walk into the room, turn on the light, turn off the light. Walk into the room, turn on the light, turn off the light. And eventually, I will have created in myself a behavior and a habit that every time I walk into that room, I'm turning on the light, right? Or always putting the toilet seat down, right? Like, especially in a house full of women. So repeating that behavior is what will embed it, and practicing it is where we see our progress. Conventional wisdom usually says that in order to create a new habit, we have to want it. And that's not always the case, right? Like a lot of times we want to lose weight. We want to read more. We want to do so many different things in our lives. But in reality, what makes a behavior more likely is, again, it's frequency. That frequency is what builds it up. So how do we get into that frequency? How do we make it easy? So what do you think is easier, 100 push-ups or 1 push-up? Right? Like 100 push-ups could be the goal, right? And if we're not doing 1 a day, we'll never hit 100 a day. If we start with 100, we might physically wear ourselves out so much that we can't do 100 a few days from now, especially if you're not very physically fit. So again, getting into the frequency of the behavior that will create the habit. Do 1 a day, then do 5 a day, then do 10 a day, and build up until you have developed a frequency that you know you're going to get down and do those push-ups every day. If the yoga at 40 minutes a day is too hard, then do yoga for 5 minutes a day, right? 5-minute a day yoga is better than no yoga a week or two from now. There's a principle in physics called the principle of least action. We could call it in behavior the law of least effort. And that is that humans will, when given 2 opportunities, choose the one that takes the least amount of effort. How many times has that happened for us in our lives where we look at that and we look at that and we're like, is it easier to order food in or go out and pick up food, right? Is it easier to stand up and get the remote or just sit here and do nothing, right? Like, we're given 2 choices, we choose the one that requires the least amount of effort. And so that's why it takes us all the way back to the beginning when we all started this. That literally, to create a behavior, to form a habit, you need to have enough willpower, enough self-discipline in order to run that sprint each day and form the habit. So that's make it easy. What are you doing to make your habits easier? We talked about changing your environment a bit to make it more obvious. Can you also change your environment to make it easier? In the comments today, why doesn't everybody just list something that they can do to make the habit that they are working to form a little bit easier in their routine? That's it for today. We'll talk a little bit more about Make It Easy tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.